So it's where we're trying to change something. We're trying to bring a new product to market. We're trying to transform a business. We're trying to do something, different. There was no rule book. There was no, we must follow some very rigid structure. It was a case of, I have this problem, I have this opportunity, and I want it solved. And can you help me? You now have this ability to unleash the creative, but also you're able to unleash it in a way that's interactive. You're able to create an actual experience and play with it and feel it and understand it and go, oh, I like this, I don't like that.
Kevin, thank you very much for coming in and joining us in our studio today.
Brilliant. I'm delighted to be here. Very impressive.
You have been a very, very good, helpful mentor to me over the years. Not necessarily we speak an awful lot, but when we did speak, you gave me good insights that I would kind of take away and kind of squirrel away. I was thinking working out, it was at least 7 or 8 years since I've kind of known you, and I think we met, I think you were at Optum at the time, back in the day.
Back, all right, yeah.
I think it's worth just giving a bit of an overview about your journey to now and just the variety of different hats you've worn and the different perspectives you've got, because for what we're going to talk about, I think it's important. If you wouldn't want to share it, tell me a little bit about that.
I won't give you the full gory details. There would be here for hours, but I've been in the tech sector for 30 years, over 30 years, as you can see, a few grey hairs. But I tend to work on what I would describe as the more innovative areas of technology. So it's where we're trying to change something. We're trying to bring a new product to market. We're trying to transform a business. We're trying to do something different. And I've done that across lots of different sectors, from financial services to healthcare to marketing to advertising to various other ones. And that's given me an interesting perspective. But I also spent a few years in the startup land. I have my own startups. I've worked with a lot of startups. I've been on the investment side. I worked for a venture capital firm for a while when I was in the US and here. But I also, for my sins, I ran some research labs and innovation labs for both CEDAR, the lab out in UCD. I was the original director for that. I worked with Enterprise Ireland and IDA to help set that up. So that was an interesting experience, seeing it from the academic side and trying to get a new lab, which is like incredibly successful now. So it's an amazing an amazing lab to see flourishing at the moment. And then you mentioned Optum. I was working in there in a research capacity for one of the largest companies on the planet. So again, multinational land, startup land, investment side, academia. So I've got a different perspective and across different industries. So I take it as a good thing.
It's incredible because like so many people just stay in one lane, they tunnel, they just keep going to different areas, but you've been so brave to actually step out, like you go from that kind of VC when you're a completely different perspective, completely different kind of overview in terms of how you look at it, then from the research, and then Optum, such a huge company, there's so much impact for people who don't even know how big they scale, particularly in the US, of what they do. But you talk about innovation. How important is that human connection, the people as well? Because sometimes the tech gets all the applause, but how important it is to bringing all those different diverse stakeholders together?
I have an acronym that I use at the moment. You talk about the talent, I talk about velocity, and I talk about impact. And those 3 areas are to me, whether sometimes you talk people, process, technology, but in whatever guise that we want to discuss it, I don't believe you can take the human element out. I work for a company called All Human right now, and and there's a reason why we talk about the humanity and humans and what humans are doing, and and all of the variety and the incredible creativity and innovation, and that's something that I've always tried to bring together in everything that I do. But I think it's also really important that you understand the capabilities of the technology, the boundaries of the technology, and then there's that kind of messy piece in the middle, which is let's call it the process piece, or the velocity piece, or the piece where you try to bring it together. How do you gel all the humans and the tech into this cohesive machine to try and achieve some outcome for an organization? That's it's kind of the fun and the challenging part all in one.
How would you describe All Human in terms of their values, kind of boutique, but kind of the nature of the work you're trying to help your customers with? That's one question. And the second question, why did you join? Because could have been a variety of different areas, quite a different journeys you could have gone on. What propelled you to do that?
Well, I have an interesting perspective with All Human because I was a customer of theirs twice, before, and that's where I got to know John, the CEO and the team, and and it gave me this really interesting, like, I'm using this team essentially to help me solve different problems that I had in several other organizations, and they did it incredibly well. And they weren't afraid with the breadth of some of the challenges that I posed, to get solved. There was no rule book. There was no, we must follow some very rigid structure. It was a case of, I have this problem, I have this opportunity, and I want it solved. And can you help me? And the answer was yes. And so that was my original experience. And so when I was thinking, probably towards the end of last year, what do I do next? And one of my first calls that I made was to John Mitchell, the CEO, and we had a fantastic conversation about this incredible change that we're seeing in the world around AI. What does that mean to many organizations? What does that mean both to a company like All Human, as an agency, as a problem solver, as a service delivery organization, and also to the clients that we're servicing. And to me, that was just this opportunity to come in. I mentioned a minute ago about this idea that I sit on the change agent side of the technology sector, and what better place to be in is an organization that's all about change. And we describe All Human as this organization that's like at the intersection of design, credible design, and creative people. We've engineering, and that we use insights as well to power all of that. And in my opinion, all three components are really prevalent and incredibly important at the moment in this world of flux that we're seeing here in AI and everything that everyone's talking about.
It's funny because in this whole flux, in using your words, companies seem to be particularly good in one, but they don't necessarily have the kind of the design thinker empathy of all of them together. And that's probably where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Where an awful lot of the AI work is coming through, or a little bit of slop. It's kind of like, it's okay, but it's not quite right.
Yeah.
And having that intersection of the different stakeholders to bring together to go, actually, you know what, that's closer to where we're trying to get to. And that's the marginal gain that's kind of probably going to get you to that next level. When you're working with customers to try to help them go on their journey, where there's FOMO, there's the element of kind of risk, how do you help them on that journey to take the next step, see the bigger vision, go on it, where they've got a wealth of options, but you can probably see from your experience, the team's experience, what you've done well, what you do well, in a world of total change?
Yeah, I think there's, of course, a variety of customers at different ends of the spectrum, and not all are going to want to go on that journey, and but many are, and as you said, the FOMO thing, or just where do I begin? How do I just take my company to the next stage? I don't know where to start, and I tend to take a step back, and across the firm we try to come back to what is it you're trying to do as a company. And a lot of times you see organizations, they start in different places. So sometimes you'll see companies trying to start at the internal transformation phase, and that's okay. You can start wherever you want, but we tend to focus on what's happening at those touch points with customers, the outside world, so the experiences to, help you find new customers, to retain existing customers, to service those customers better, and you're at that touch point of, what's actually happening with the outside world, because that's a very different place than the internal, organization. The bar, for one, is higher. Performance is higher. The experience has to be better, because nobody will engage with it, and things like all the security requirements and all of those things all have to be melded together to create this incredible experience to allow that organization to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. From there, usually you can start working back into the organization. And so I'm not saying we don't work internally in the transformation, of course we do, but it's informed by what you're trying to do with an external experience. So you might say, let's pick on one, say the servicing customers. To me, it's one of the most badly executed parts of the current experience. So many companies are just throwing on a chatbot, and expecting some magic because now I've put some chatbot slapped onto the side of my website. It's an incredibly horrible experience. But when you think about if you wanted to do it right and what servicing a customer means to some organization, like what does it actually mean to you? How do you want that customer to feel? And then you start looking at, well, how do I actually start thinking about the things that are happening internally within your organization? Because maybe you can't create the experience you want because there's something else happening somewhere in the bowels of your organization. And now we have to move back in and start changing all of those so we can eventually create this incredible experience.
Yeah.
That's, how, or one way of starting, to engage with the client.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny, I was reading Upstream, this book, and it gives the example of Expedia, where they were doing, or it was a Booking.com, is one of them, where they had something like 4 million calls per year based on one simple error, which they only put in their email address once. And when they only put it in once, a lot of times they put it in incorrectly. So that meant is they didn't get their booking information directly sent to their email. So they called to go, hey, where's my booking? But when they changed it to verify it twice, it got rid of that problem. And because nobody was in charge of that part of the customer journey, they were all doing areas, they had all these different areas to do. So you kind of talk about a really interesting point on friction, where if you just put that chap on, you think it's going to solve the problem. But actually from a design UX perspective, you've no insight in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And it's also a good point, because what do you want to achieve? Because in the world of pivots, FOMO, so many different options, upsells, it can be hard actually to recenter, to go, are we a tech company? What type of company
exactly
are we? Like, because, and then you hear every company's a tech company. Well, are they really? Yeah. So is that you and the team sitting down with the bigger vision and saying, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I know you mentioned going to start with the kind of day zero again. Is that just looking at that bigger vision and going, if we could get to here, would we even want to get there? Is that our journey? I kind of see you as that kind of Sherpa.
Yeah, some customers do have a vision, in that regard. Lots of customers have those visions. Some are not there yet, and so part of the journey is helping them on that journey, and helping them to figure out what that might be. So we will start at different parts of the research is a major part of that, and you'll try to understand what it is that you're going to do, or what the strengths are, and all the basics of a business. So we will start in multiple places, but the ideal place is to figure out that experience, and if we can get that understanding of what you want to try and achieve, you now have the basis to layer in the technology, rather than starting necessarily with the technology and looking for a use for it. There's a bit of give in that, but I think in today's world, you've got to have different perspectives, because you might come out with the first experience. You might have this amazing vision. You might start somewhere in your journey, and when whoever I think there's a famous Mike Tyson quote where he talks about like every plan falls apart when you get hit in the face, kind of thing. And it's that idea. Your customers start reacting to your site. Thus the insight piece. You start seeing what's actually resonating, what's actually working, and you can be incredibly humbled when you see what's happening in that regards. And so the whole this is a journey. It's not one of these old models where you go, great, got a vision, build it, walk away, and we're done. No, not in the current world, because it's continuously evolving, and that's, I think, what we're seeing with organizations. This cycle, that's really important.
Please give me 30 seconds of your time. It blows my mind that only 9% of listeners actually subscribe to our podcast. I'm going to ask you one favor. If you like and enjoy this podcast, please can you subscribe? That one thing will really, really help us and the team get you the very, very best guests. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you think about all the experience you've had in all those different roles, you've been doing AI for so long, what do you make of the whole vibe coding and creating websites in a moment, and everyone's now an AI expert? Like, Are you watching from behind just kind of cringing? Are you watching from behind going, is this never going to work? Or what's it like for you to be seeing this now? And then I suppose you've got customers saying to you, just throw some AI at it. We can do this. Or I saw a demo. I just want it like that.
Of course. Yeah, this wouldn't be the first time. As I said, I've been in the sector for a few years. So I've seen many of these, these changes, when we went to, the web, and when we went to, mobile, and, various other eras in our evolution. They were probably a bit slower in how it played out over time. AI is a little bit of we're on an accelerant here at the moment with the amount of change. It's incredible. But I like to look at it from the opportunity. I always start with the opportunity. I'm an opportunist. I just like the opportunistic part of, what you can do with the technologies. But that doesn't mean you go in blindly, because it always has, there's always a limitation. There's always certain boundaries that you can't, cross over, or things that it can't do. So yes, there are certain applications that you can go into a Lovable or a Replit or some of these other tools, and you can crank something out incredibly quickly. But can you bring it into full-blown production? Maybe in certain cases, if it's a very simple application, but maybe internally. And I think that where those boundaries are moving. They're definitely moving all the time. We coined this phrase internally. We call it vibe scaling. This idea of, the power of vibe coding, in my mind, means that you can really tackle this idea of accelerating roadmaps for organizations. And what I mean by that is, normally every organization has this infinite list of things that they want to do, but they're held back by their inability to actually go and do it because of the way we organize teams and the way we have structures and processes and release cycles and all of that, that stuff. And now you have this ability to, tackle many of those areas really, really quickly. And I've been in, a number of fortunate organizations with visionary leaders in those organizations. And never once did those organizations have this challenge of, we only have one idea. Normally they had many ideas, but they were restricted to execute just and pick one of them and go down that line. And I see this opportunity, particularly at the early stages of, and as we were speaking earlier, this fleshing out part of, what is this experience going to be? What are the things that we would like to create? And the opportunity to create this abundance of different types of visions and different types of experiences. And obviously working for an organization that has an incredible amount of designers and creative people, we now have this, amazing, not just a petri dish to test one thing. We can have lots of them. It creates a different problem, though, which is kind of like a taste problem. You have to now pick one direction, but it gives you this ability, especially at the beginning of these cycles, where you're not restricted to just one written down product requirements document, and we're just going to execute that in sequence and continue on. You now have this ability to unleash the creative, but also you're able to unleash it in a way that's interactive. Like the designer isn't just creating like one Figma page and we all look at it and we go, oh, I like that. You're able to create an actual experience and play with it and feel it and understand it and go, oh, I like this, I don't like that. Yeah. And so on. And and when I say accelerate, it kind of gets you, because think about the way we would have traditionally built software. We probably would have picked one thing, we would have gone through the whole cycle, we would have created an MVP or a V1 or something, and we would have released it to the market. What do you think, market? And the market goes, nah, I don't like it, or I don't like these pieces. And then you start the iteration process, but it's a much longer cycle. Now we can kind of short circuit some of those things. We can get clients to play with it as well and get their feedback, but it's not in a static way, it's in an interactive way. Of course, you now have a challenge that's entirely AI produced in many cases. So what do you do then? And it doesn't mean we throw away all of the good engineering practices or the good practices to bring these things to life. And that was the idea that, why we coined this idea of vibe scaling. It's like, well, we need to bridge this creative, intuitive, exploratory phase where we can rapidly create all these things and bring it towards production ready. How are we going to do that? How are we going to start layering in the tools? And some of them are AI-powered tools as well that we can start to layer in. But we need to layer these things in a way that it goes on that journey. Because again, like I said earlier, this is a public experience. It's going to be on your website, even if it's a content website or an e-commerce website. You're going to have hundreds of thousands or millions of customers are going to be coming into this thing. So you need to make sure it works, and you're not just, more than likely for a significant sized business, you're going to take a lovable prototype and just throw it up on your website. That's probably not the journey you're going to take today, maybe in the future. But there is a path. And I think, to me, that's where some of these tools from an efficiency perspective can come in, and you get the benefits of this unleash the creativity, but also bring it on a journey that we can start bringing it into production. And I think the accumulative change that we have here is that roadmaps start to accelerate over time, because we can essentially create more feedback. We can get earlier feedback in the process, and we can start to think about things in a much different way.
So that's taking that feedback early in the process, and then giving the different options and choice is so helpful. And I think you can get out the lovables and the replicas, but as you said, scaling that is so challenging. But also, you don't know what happens until it's out in the wild. Right, because this is where you got hallucinations, you got the queries not working. I think Apple came out with that paper recently about the challenges that they can see. So I suppose it's managing expectations, but then using those tools in the correct way to help you augment your journey that you can work on. Tell us about some of the customers and some of the problems you've helped solve.
I think probably one of the most interesting experiences was in healthcare, where it was a company I worked a number of years ago, not Optum. Let's Get Checked. It was an incredible Irish success story of a visionary organization trying to transform healthcare, and that journey for me was an incredible journey, because we were learning both on the consumer side and on the business to business side. We're an Irish organization. We're trying to connect into mostly US healthcare and learn the structure of that organization. But what it also meant was you're trying to marry, we were marrying a lot of the experience side of this, make it easy at every stage in the process. And what I really loved in that is, there was some quotes we used internally. We used to describe it as where digital meets physical, because this is a healthcare company. It was diagnostic tests, so you physically have to take a test, and probably a finger prick test for doing, say, a diabetes test or something like that. But you have to physically get that vial back to a lab, and there's the logistics, and there's the lab testing, and there's all of those other components that would have been along the way. So there's a lot of things in that experience that are not just about the digital experience, but it's also that piece where digital meets the supply chain, where it meets all the other component parts. And it was an exercise in having to try and change an organization to create something that was incredibly powerful for actual real patients and to actually impact from a healthcare perspective. And so as a complete kind of end to end, and I loved the fact that it was digital and physical and all the challenges in between. That was certainly one of the more creative and instrumental kind of experiences that I've been part of.
And what type of projects do you and the team want to work on, or what's giving you energy? What's kind of exciting you for the next kind of months to come?
I think for me, what I see is this opportunity that none of us know where things are going to change with all of this, inverted commas, AI stuff. And I think there's probably two sides to this. There's a traditional, what I would call your traditional AI engineering. And it's kind of weird to be saying traditional AI engineering, considering it's relatively recent in the last couple of decades. But what I mean by that is somebody who's trying to put AI or ML type features into a product. So it could be recommendation engines, it could be chat capabilities or Gen AI type capabilities, or using some retrieval augmented generation or any of the other kind of portfolio of tools that we would have used traditionally across the board. How do I bring that capability now into a product? Because that changes. That's not just your standard software engineering. And where I'm going with this is that's hard, because that also brings in some of these other challenges, like how do you test that? How do you deal with what people call this non-deterministic behavior? And essentially, how is the user, particularly with the more natural language type interfaces, you don't know what the user is going to ask. You don't know how necessarily the agent is going to respond. And now you need to start thinking about the guardrails and the cycles of that. And so there's this whole body of work, and lots of people, and we're doing some of that as well, where you're dealing with those kind of the AI features that are going into traditional type products. Like there's a whole challenge with that. But when I think about where we really need to go here, if you think about some of the experiences that we're seeing today, it's a bit like, I equate it back to different eras that we've seen in the past, and it's like when TV was invented. The first TV shows were probably a bit like this. It was radio with a camera, and it was essentially not changed. The medium was kind of the same. We just put a visual element, and it was really only when clever and creative people started to exploit the power of the medium that was now available to them, that we saw this tremendous growth and change over the years. And AI is this Gen AI era, if you like, I feel is at one of those tipping points that we're kind of doing a little bit of it's still kind of radio, and we're trying to make it a bit faster, and we're adding extra capability, but in many cases we haven't really changed a whole lot. Certain things are just speeded up a bit. Yeah. But now we have this opportunity to think about what are the next set of experiences. What does a content site or experience for an organization that's all about content, or trying to disseminate. It's not even about the content. It's about what are they trying to do? Are they trying to impart information? Are they what is it? Is it a news organization? Yeah. Is it e-commerce organizations? But I know that it's unlikely, and I would be incredibly surprised, and this might be one of those moments that we replay and go, God, you got that one wrong. But I can't see the experience that we're all going to end up with being a chat experience where everything is endlessly scrolling up and down a chat. Yeah. Like it's a very limited experience. It's great for certain things, but it's also not taking advantage of the real estate, or not taking advantage of the capabilities that we have available external. And it's also assuming that it's chat in or voice in, same natural language in and out. But it's also the output is coming back in that same medium. I don't see that that's going to be our future. I think we're going to be in a much more multimodal type world, either multimodal within a screen or multimodal beyond that, where we're going to see an awful lot more creativity in the interaction, in the interfaces, in the blending of things like the agents. You can imagine, I don't know what your shopping experience is like, but sometimes using shopping carts is a horrible experience in my mind. Like where I go out and pick products and I put it into a shopping cart, then I have to go to the shopping cart and figure out all these things. There's much better ways of doing that. There's much better ways of engaging.
We got this agentic AI with the Visa and MasterCard. They're already kind of going up, whereas like I want to get Liverpool tickets and it's going to go and find me the tickets, or I've got €40 and I want to go and get that present, it does it for you. Already you see these companies signing up. So it's so exciting to see. But then the next question will come for businesses like on Post is, are you set up for when these AI agents are shopping for your SEO, because they're going to shop in a different way than people do Google search or something. Yeah. So this is a completely different way of even looking at it. So that's fascinating. Question for you. What way do you use AI tools yourself? Like, have you got any kind of hacks that you use? I'm doing Whisperflow, where I'm doing kind of speech to text, which is kind of a new kind of thing for me now without the keyboard, which is kind of cool. Is there anything that you're using yourself at all?
I have so many tools that I use that sometimes they all blur into each other. So of course sometimes I'm using them to test them and to to figure things out. But one of the most useful ones, and it's probably one of the most simple use cases of them all, my job is also to understand what's going on in the market, and and all of the other things, no different than yourself probably, Mark. But I have a whole suite of agents that I deploy every day that essentially go out and distill, the breadth of news from all sorts of different places, and it distills it down to a 300-word briefing that I get every morning. That I read over my coffee, and it gives me all the links into, everything that if I want to go deep. So I pick a lot of topics. I pick product management topics. I've got data and kind of heavy engineering topics. I've got a lot of the new, just general news and so on. There's about 5 or 6 topics that I track. And I boiled them down to this, really, really distilled, briefing.
So helpful.
Yeah.
So helpful.
That's one of the most useful ones. There's a lot of other ones depending on different use cases that I would have. But
even that one is brilliant. Kevin Magee, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Delighted. Thanks, Mark.
Hello, my name is Mark Kelly, founder of AI Ireland. We're passionate about collaboration and sharing the incredible stories behind every AI journey. That's why we're always looking for guests to join our in-person AI Ireland podcast experience. If you're working on innovative AI projects or have a story that can inspire others, we want to hear from you. This is your chance to share your insights, experiences, and ideas with a really vibrant community that's as excited about AI as you are. So if you're ready to be part of this conversation and help shape the future of AI in Ireland, please get in touch today. We can't wait to collaborate with you. Thank you.